Towards the end of 2022, I was probably at the lowest point in my life. I had this massive mounting pressure of the world around me, a YouTube channel that I was just thinking terrible things about. I was working myself to death, and I couldn't see anything that I had done that had even made a dent in my life because I just kept pushing forward and working with spite. We're now almost at the start of 2024, and I've had time to sit, think about my life, and push forward. I don't see myself as a failure anymore, and I'm gonna tell everybody why. What led up to it, why I don't think I'm a failure anymore, and I hope by the end of this video, you guys can learn that you're not a failure either. I know this isn't the normal video for this channel. I know that most people aren't going to make it past this point in the video itself, but I urge you to continue watching as I go through a story. Before I begin, though, I would like to say these are real events. These things did happen. Sometimes not as elegantly as I'm going to put. If you know anybody from any of this, do not contact them, do not harass them, do not attack them.
Hi everybody, so before we get into this, I do want to clarify a few things. One, this is based on a comic book that I drew involving my actual life, my life outside of the camera and the lights and YouTube. So please, whatever you do, don't harass anybody if you know them, and try to be a little bit gentle in the comments, because I know how much everybody likes to say, oh, let's tear this person down for opening up on the internet. I know it's basically rule number one, be careful about what you share on the internet, but I think it's very important, for me at least, to get this out in the open, connect with my audience a little bit more, and tell you guys, well, what is a day in the life of me? What makes me me? And why is this probably part of succeeding and not so much drawn out failure? Another thing that I would like to state is I have a plan going forward into 2024. I feel a lot better from the time that I did draw that comic. Bits of it will show up on your screen, probably next to me, on this side, yeah, that side. Yeah, no, I've got 12 videos planned for next year, one for each month, so without further ado, let's get into this. To start this story out, I would like to state that I was born prematurely, by about 2 weeks. It went on to influence a little bit of my life in some ways. The people I talk to, the family members I prefer to be around. And these are things you probably wouldn't think it would influence, but it really did. But when I was really little, it was just me, my little brother, and my sister. According to my sister, my dad decided to open up his mouth and pick favorites. I was never much of his favorite, and it hurt, but I didn't find out about it until secondhand, to be perfectly honest. And then, when I was 9, my dad told me that no one would ever show up to my funeral. The exact quote was, "When your grandfather died, we couldn't stop people from coming into the funeral home. If you died tomorrow, not a single soul would show up for you." I don't know what he was trying to tell me at 9 years old, but it hurt all the same. A little later on in high school, I ended up falling in love with a guy. He didn't like me back, and my mom told me to not really talk about relationships. I guess she wasn't ready to discuss the birds and the bees with me. She never did, really. But eventually, I was about 15, and she kept asking me, am I gay? Am I straight? And she'd ask it. The anger in her eyes, she'd get louder and louder. louder. She wouldn't really give me a moment to speak. I didn't feel safe to answer. I was already uncomfortable. I stopped seeing my dad when I was 12. I was uncomfortable, I was lonely, and I was scared. I just didn't know what to do. And that guy I liked, well, at 16 years old, he told me that I was looking for comfort, and that I didn't deserve it, and that I would never deserve it. And that hurt a lot, because I thought he was a good friend. So I was scared, I was a little bit rattled and heartbroken. I was worried, wasn't ready to tell my mom anything yet, and eventually she stabbed back with what she said. She said, "That's wrong, you're wrong, and be normal. Never talk to me about this ever again." Those were the words. Those were the exact words in the exact order. And it hurt. It hurt pretty bad. Now, up to this point in my life, I had already been told by multiple people that I was a failure. By my father when we talked about school. By my mother when we talked about relationships and school and my future. No matter what I talked about, it just felt like a failure. I don't think that's the way it should be, but that's the way it felt. But here's the question for this. If I was a failure that early on, considered that by my father, by my mother, by my friends, well, why did I keep trying? Now, yes, it hurt. A lot. Like, in what ways wouldn't this hurt? I guess the bigger question was I a failure when my dad chose my little brother over me? Or was I a failure for just coming out too soon? You got a fault. You were born early. And eventually, at 17, my crush stopped speaking to me. I didn't speak to my dad again until I was nearly 17. That was something huge. And that's a lot to take in. I know. Petty crushes, coming out of the closet far too soon, and being hurt by the people that you think love you. Well, let's take a step back. Let's recenter for a moment. When I was 9 years old, I joined the furry fandom. It was my escape from my dad's harsh words. He yelled at me almost every single day I was over. If there wasn't a day where I wasn't being yelled at by a teacher or my mother, then I was being yelled at by my father and his girlfriend. So, I drew. A lot. I doodled everywhere. Papers, schoolwork, my sketch pad that I carried around with me everywhere. I'd filled out a sketchbook every single month. If there was a month with something going on, I was probably drawing. I would have to have a new sketchbook by the end of the month. There was once or twice where I legitimately had to have 2 sketchbooks for that month. I had filled out the first one within the first 2 weeks. But of course, my drawings are going to be seen. I was going to show them off. I was proud of them. And by my mother, it was used as another reason to yell at me. She told me to draw landscapes and to pick a real job at 13. When I was really little, I wanted to be an astronaut. And when I got older, I wanted to be an artist and a game designer. But I was told that video game development wasn't a real job by my mother. I was told that being an artist isn't going to pay your bills. I was even told making videos for YouTube is pointless because no one would ever watch them. And I had a lot of issues in school. Tons of issues. I couldn't remember lessons when it came to test time. I was constantly blacking out at school, so I legitimately would be in class 1 second and the bell would ring the next. And I legitimately wouldn't remember anything that happened in that lesson that day. I needed glasses to see what I was doing. And eventually, it became apparent that I might drop out, which Would have left my mom pretty heartbroken, I'm sure. But I didn't. I made it through, despite my mom being way too busy to help me with my schoolwork. In fact, she couldn't take the time to even help me understand lessons, let alone understand them herself. She had to go to work every single day, or so I thought. She kept acting like work was the most important thing for her, but she never went to go find a different job. She never thought that maybe I should spend some time with her. And by this point in my life, I hadn't really seen my father that much either. So it's like I didn't have either parent. And that was weird. Eventually I graduated. Huzzah! I finally made it out of the system. And at 18, I met a guy. Heck, I knew him at 16. But it was neither here nor there. I had a plan. I had a job for about a year now, and I decided, let's go. I had a little bit of money saved up from a previous work venture you may have heard me mention on this channel. So, time to leave. I got the guy up there, and I decided me and him, we're gonna leave, run away, we're gonna get him a job, rent a place, and be happy. Yes, because I thought this was a real good plan. Sadly, I didn't end up thinking this through all the way. In fact, dare I say, I didn't think it through at all. We ended up living at my mom's. And at first, I didn't require any rent. And then she raised the rent on this man that I considered my boyfriend. And then she raised the rent on me. Till eventually, half our monthly checks were going to my mom. Now note, I didn't work a good job. I worked at Subway, and we just couldn't seem to make ends meet. We couldn't save up enough to even leave. Heck, we barely had enough to pay for a car. And eventually, my mom started yelling at me. Again. At 18. Not to get out of her house, but to get this stranger out of her house. And also to yell at me because I chose somebody who I like to hang out with who was weird. The thing I didn't tell my mom because I wasn't sure how to bring it up was that my boyfriend had PTSD. In fact, it got kind of bad sometimes. He was abused by his parents and, well, a lot of stuff that I don't really feel like I have permission to get into. But for the sake of this story, for the sake of moving forward, I dealt with it, and I moved past it. My mom started dating this guy, and he was a total jerk. We had to move out of my mom's place. You see, my mom's new boyfriend started leaving food at our house, and my boyfriend ended up eating it. He got hungry when we had no money, and accidentally ate his Chinese food. It was just leftovers. No big deal, right? Let bygones be bygones. But instead, he antagonized us and threatened to kill my new boyfriend. There were a lot of red flags with this man, and my mom did not see the murder as one. Nobody got injured, nobody got hurt. Well, except for my feelings. My trust in the lady that cared for me, looked after me, or at least I thought she cared, told me to leave. And here's where I gotta stop again. Just for a moment. If I graduated, did I succeed? Was that my goal? I don't know. My mom didn't seem to think of it as a failing. So, perhaps not. Me landing a job at Subway. Well, nobody seemed to think of that as failing at the time. Me having a boyfriend. It didn't look like a failure to me, but my mom clearly thought of it as a failure. And me getting kicked out. Did I just fail again? I don't know. And I couldn't tell anybody. Who was I going to tell? I didn't have that many close relationships in school, and most of those people had left for college. And to make matters worse, I had nowhere to go. But we moved. We left down south for good old Kentucky. I don't like Kentucky much anymore. We moved into my boyfriend's parents' house, and when I tried to take a GameStop job, I wanted to be a manager. I just wanted the experience and a little bit of money. We were gonna get a house, rent it. It's okay because housing's cheaper down here. Well, it's cheaper because everywhere is so far to go. There's nothing down there. It's an empty state. But I couldn't live a very healthy lifestyle down there. I was getting yelled at. I was forced to take a job I didn't want. Every single night was a new problem. And it wasn't a problem for, say, Truman. He was always welcome in their home. But it was a problem for me. I was too fat. I was too ugly. I wasn't a woman. I couldn't bear children. And eventually, I started losing sleep. A lot of sleep. And eventually, I ended up having to go sleep at an Amazon building. The place I worked. In fact, it went on for a week straight. I was cold, I was shivering, I was tired, and eventually I ended up passing out in the car at the end of the week. I missed 3 straight days of work because of lack of sleep. Needless to say, we moved back up north. Couldn't stand it. I quit my job, and I tried to get back in contact with my mom, thinking, well, I'm out of the house now, what could she possibly do to me? What could she do? At least I could get some advice from her, right? Well, my boyfriend said, that sounds like an okay plan. And I called her. And the first thing I heard were insults. The man I had just moved 2 states with, she was insulting. But I hoped it would end up helping in the long run. Like, maybe, if I put up with enough insults, and enough mockery of me and him, eventually we might get some good advice out of it, right? Well, for this, I would say I probably failed. But not because I chose to do something poorly and messed it up, but because I let somebody who I knew was hurtful and mean back into my life. She already didn't accept my lifestyle, or that's the way she put it, but she also didn't accept my hobbies, my interests, or even the people I cared about. Eventually, we ended up moving again. You see, the friends I had moved in with were starting to become less and less of my friends. I just couldn't seem to make a good impression on these people. The new roomies were hostile to each other, including me, and I just couldn't take it. So, we moved out, and I thought that winter, in February, maybe my life would start going better. Instead, I ended up working nearly every single day. Stressed out, overeating, spending all of my paychecks on fast food because I couldn't bear to look at a stove anymore. And eventually, I was close to getting a manager position, but I quit. In fact, I quit that, got a different job, and then quit that. I could not take fast food anymore. I had done it when I was younger, and I was still doing it now, and I just couldn't see myself going forward with it anymore. And me telling my mom all of this, I thought, yeah, I'm gonna do what I love, what I'm passionate about. 2022, we're gonna live my life the way I could. I'm gonna make my dream come true. I'm gonna make art. I'm gonna do videos. And maybe someday a video game or something. Just put something creative into the world that people could watch, play, look at, and enjoy. Inspire them to do something better. Just inspire them to create. So I got to work, and I pushed myself. And I tried. I worked every day. And each week, sometimes I'd spend a month at a time. But I'd call my mom. Every single week. And she told me, it's not a real job. And eventually, she told me, well, every day must be a day off for you. I was taken aback. My art, my animations, my videos, my scripting, my streaming, my organizing, all of it. Every single piece that I did, coming up with new ideas, creating new overlays, and making a VTuber model. It just wasn't good enough. My mom had marked me as a failure. So, I worked harder, streamed every single day, or as many days as I could. I made up business cards. I made scripts for the next year. And I made myself sick from stress, overworking, under-eating. Just constantly. Had no money, but my boyfriend was willing to support me through it. Because he thought what I did was very important. And eventually, it became too much. At the end of 2022, I felt like I was at my lowest point. I was a failure in my mom's eyes. I still wasn't on great speaking terms with my father. My new boyfriend, I found out, well, not new at that point. We had been dating for quite some time. Found out he did some stuff behind my back, and he really apologized. And he really meant it. But I couldn't see that. I couldn't see what had changed through the woods. I couldn't see that anything was different. I was crying and screaming back and forth. My life was a mess, and eventually in June of 2023, I started therapy. My memory was getting patchier. I couldn't remember Wednesday from Tuesday. My days were blurring together, and then some days were just cut out altogether. There'd be days where I couldn't remember a Monday. I could barely remember what happened Christmas Eve. And I needed help. I was blacking out and then ending up at my desk. What was I to do? Was I a failure for going to therapy? No. Of course not. Anybody can go. Everybody needs help. We're all human. And in July, the end of it all, I had gone to a psych evaluation. I had plurals. For those who don't know, it's a mixture of dissociative identity disorder, a bunch of other problems, including depression, stressful situations and environments, and between it all, it turned out I had 3 personalities, and we were basically tearing each other apart for time out in the light. My depression was getting worse, I was overwhelmed, and every time we switched, there would be a sharp pain and our mood would shift. It wasn't fun. Let me make that clear. It wasn't fun. So we knew we had to get a healthier lifestyle, more of a grip on what's going on up here. And I worked. Not in the same way I'd worked in the past. No. I started moving at my own pace. I knew that I had to step away from my mom's pace. I was working so hard to appease her, and I wasn't even living with her. And by October, I told my friends. By the end, I told my boyfriend. I was scared. I was nervous. What were they gonna think? Oh, yes, the man you've been dating has 3 people in his head. And he doesn't know what to do. None of us know what to do. We feel like failures. We never stopped to see what we had achieved, where we had made it. And that's when he told me, no. That's when he told us, I love you no matter how many of you there are. I love you for you, damn it. And that's what matters to me. We were confused. I had to take a step back. Wasn't wrong. Wasn't a mistake. Wasn't a monster for my condition. And it wasn't a failure. For once in my life, I wasn't a failure. Confused and scared, we asked him to hate us. We asked him to dislike us, to just rip us a new one, dump us, leave us, just run away. Because we still felt like a mistake for being us. For being the person we wanted to be. I was looking for any reason to reject my boyfriend. I was looking for any reason to reject love, and was I broken? Was this what I was looking for? Needless to say, by the end of October, I was feeling better. I had just spent the last year toiling away on myself, working on our problems and our faults, and trying to be a better man. Because the minute you stop growing is the minute you fail. At least in our eyes. So I had hope that maybe, middle of November, maybe, just maybe, my mom had changed. And I called her. Hey Mom, this is the man. I'm gonna propose. And what she told me, well, it hurt worse than every other second she told me other things. Every time she had told me that I was wrong for being gay, that I should have drawn something else, that I should look for a real job, that my boyfriend wasn't good enough to be my man. There was so much she told me before, but this was a part of the smoking gun. She told us, I don't approve of your lifestyle. And eventually, I had to call her again and ask what she meant. Really? You don't approve of my lifestyle? What does that mean, Mom? You taught me my lifestyle. I work, I clean, I help. What? And she told me, well, your marriage will never be valid. And I felt crushed. Empty, angry. I didn't know what to feel. What was I supposed to say? It was hurtful. It was mean. I didn't know what to do. So I went through with my plan. I was gonna propose. But there wouldn't be a wedding. December 2nd, I did it. I didn't have a ring. I made something personal. A necklace. Something that really spoke to our craftiness and our creativeness and showed that we really did put the time and the effort in. And he said yes. I still wasn't sure what to think about my mom. And I really don't think I still am. But 14 days later, me and my new husband prepared to see my mom for an early Christmas, and it was at her house. My mom basically ignored us. She'd already upset my sister and yelled at her kids. Her boyfriend glared at us from across the yard every time he entered a room. He wouldn't say 2 words to my husband. He didn't say congratulations to us. Neither did my mom. And eventually we just ended up leaving. I couldn't take it anymore. I finally realized what I was there for. Be laughed at and mocked at and labeled a failure. By my own family. Well, what did I need them for? The thing was, up to this point, I really had thought I had failed. That I was going on some fruitless journey from start to finish, and by the end of it all, I would just have a mess on my hands. But I tried and I pushed and I worked. And even though some of my work was on a spite, clearly I had done something. And I started to look at everything that I had done. I moved 3 times. I had an apartment. I was living my dreams. I was making art for a living. I was traveling the country for conventions. I got married to a man I dated for nearly 5 years and knew for almost 7 or 8. Those were huge accomplishments. I already graduated school. I have my diploma. I worked as a manager in a couple places. I could see things for the way they were. For once in my life. Now it's almost 2024, and I gotta say, if you look at every piece of this video and go and say, well, obviously you're a failure, I'd like to tell you that I don't see it that way anymore. I don't see my life as a failure. In fact, I've barely begun my journey. So, some of you out there are watching this and going, man, I don't feel like a winner. I'm sitting here, I'm playing video games, and I just feel dumb. Just keep pushing. Find something you love and keep going with it, because honest to God, you can't fail. The only time that you fail is, well, when you start seeing yourself as a failure. So don't ever. Don't hold regrets. Smile in the face of pain and just keep going. Because eventually, and I mean eventually, you might end up where I'm at. Happy at the end of the road and ready for more. One more thing before I close it up here. I've got videos planned for next year. I have 12 scripts ready to go. I've got streams planned for all year long. I've got shorts, ideas, and TikTok ideas out the wazoo. I'm going to be making fursuits. I'm going to be making art, and I'm going to keep pushing forward no matter what life brings me. So even if I might not live here for the rest of my life, I just want you to know that if I didn't fail, you didn't fail. because success is what you make it. And failure, well, failure is just, it's just a mindset of the old people that couldn't see themselves as succeeding. It's something from the boomers that we should just throw out. Because at the end of the day, all failure really means is that you get to try again. And with that, I have been your humble host, Gavin the Kitty. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'll see you guys next week with a stream or something else. Good night, everybody.